I recently switched from the Sony a6300 to the Fuji XT2, which is in front of you. I did a whole video on why I switched, and the XT2 really is a good fit for me. But doing the research, before I purchased it, I knew Fuji had some shortcomings on the flash side of things, and they didn't have even internal. When I say internal, I mean they don't even have Fuji branded flashes, let alone third party that do HSS, which is high speed sync, and TTL, both. There are the Nissan i40 and the new i60, I believe, that will do TTL, but nothing that'll do both. There are plans for the future. I've heard rumors that Nissan is going to launch some high-speed sync flashes, or upgrade the same flash for high-speed sync capabilities toward the end of this year. Also, Godox. There's rumors that Godox is developing and getting close to releasing it. So when I made the move, I do like those two things, and I already had the Young Now 560 version 4 and the 560 TX. From my Sony, I never sold it. It's kind of been sitting in the drawer. So I said, hey, I can get by for a while shooting manual. I did it before, and I can do it again. And really, manual, what you're giving up TTL. TTL is great if your exposure's changing all the time and you're running and gunning with your family. I used it a lot. We went to the Pacific Aquarium inside. I had a speed light in my pocket, and the same size of that, shoved in my pocket. And the X1 transmitter. I was using Godox for my Sony a6300 at the time. And inside, if you're setting up the shot, you have time, manual's fine because it's doing the same thing. But what it's doing is it's getting that exposure for you, and it doesn't get it right all the time, but it gets it darn close. So if you're telling your son, hold on, I'm going to take your picture, it's either right or you make an adjustment and take another picture. So really, really convenient. So unless you're setting up your shot, TTL is a great feature. The high-speed sync, outside, if you're trying to expose for the sky, and most of you know, but for the folks that don't, is you're adjusting that compensation for the exposure of the sky with your shutter. Most of these flashes will only sync for 1/250th of a second, including the XT2. You usually need more than that, especially if you're doing a portrait and you want to shoot f2.8 or f3, something like that. Well, your subject's going to be way underexposed if you had high-speed sync. Meaning, if you bump that without the flash, if you bump that not flash speed, I'm sorry, the shutter speed higher to compensate for the exposure of the sky is going to be exposed, but your subject is going to be way underexposed. Well, what you can use is you can use a flash. You light your subject with artificial flash, and it's a really cool photo. Problem is most flashes, including the Fuji, will only do 1/252nd of the shutter, or you'll get black lines if you try to exceed that. That's where high-speed sync comes in. High-speed sync, it syncs that multiple flashes of your camera from the inside the camera to the flash, and you get that exposure, or you don't get any lines. So, well, what do you do to compensate this? You can shoot manual and use ND filters, so that's what I'm going to go back to for a short while. You put that ND filter to, instead of adjusting the exposure of the sky with your shutter speed, you leave your shutter speed under 250 a second, and you use an ND filter to keep that light down. Now, you still light your subject, and by doing so, you get the same results. Some would argue even better, because your flash has a little bit more power than doing the small bursts with HSS, high-speed sync HSS. But essentially, you get the same thing and the same results. So it takes a little longer. You have to use filters. And when you're going back and forth in filters, unless you have like a magnetic amount, it's kind of a pain. But again, I said I could live without it until they come out with one that's dual capable, which will be probably towards the end of the year, beginning of next year. One thing that I had the 560. I have actually two of those and this transmitter. The transmitter is kind of nice because you can actually control the flash power remotely. So if you have your flash in a stand and you're doing some portraits, it's kind of nice. You don't have to keep on walking back and forth just to bump it up and down a little bit. Because if you're shooting manual, you're going to be adjusting this a lot, unless you're really good. Or using a light meter, that obviously helps too. But because you can do a test, see where you're at, adjust it. I don't use a light meter. I'm thinking about getting one, but I don't use one right now. The size of this on an XT1 or especially on the A6300 was big. I don't want to walk around with this just to remotely trigger the 560. Most of the time what I'm doing is walking around with a flash in my pocket and the camera. I just need a trigger device because I have the flash in my hand stretched as far as I can just to get it off camera. And I want the trigger system small. So I did some research, and Yongnuo makes a trigger called the, I'm going to pop it off here so you can see it a little closer and read it, but I don't know if it's getting in focus, but it's the RF603C for Canon version 2. Both my speedlights are capable of Canon, but again, they're radio frequency, so anything as far as the 560 version 4s will work if you're shooting them off camera. The transmitter is a Canon version. One of the things when I bought this is I did some research. The person had on Amazon posted he had an XT1. He said you had to hotwire this. And what that means is on some Fuji cameras, in some models, I don't know if it's different for different models of the Yongnuo, but the center pin didn't have sufficient voltage to trigger this radio transmitter and sends the signal to the speed light. So what you have to do, and there's videos on that, is you have to wire and solder up a 100 ohm resistor to get that function to work. And I didn't need it. I have resistors. I said, well, no problem. It'll take 5 seconds. But before I did that, I popped it on the camera and gave it a test, and it worked just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and show that for you. The camera's on, and as you can see, it fires, and it fires reliably. It fires every time I hit the trigger button, or the shutter button. But shutter release button. So it works great. So the form and the size function, or size, the form factor, really, I like it a lot better. The other added bonus is I don't know how practical it's going to be. I already have it, but what I was thinking about doing is I can keep this in my pocket if I know I'm going to do a lot of portraitures, and I can adjust the speed light. As I'm adjusting the speed light, it's adjusting the power ratio on the 560 version 4, and then it'll still fire. And you can actually fire it, so they're both on the same channel, so you can test it, fire it. So this will work on the XT2 as well as the 603. Those are my results. I'm really pleased with it so far to have a small trigger. And the nice part is, since it has its own built-in receiver, you don't have to add the second component on here. This is the box. This is the 603C. Bought it from Amazon. I think it was right $30. Comes with two of them. You can use them for either a transmitter or a receiver. This is set in the transmitter mode. As you can see here, it's in focus. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, please leave them below, and I'll try to answer them if I can. Thanks for watching. Bye.